You know, many model railroads fail to take into account a purpose for their existence. Real railroads serve the needs of industry. Let's visit a man who incorporated that ingredient into his plans.
One of the biggest decisions a model railroader has to make before laying down the first piece of track is what industry will the layout feature? Most people settle on one or two areas of interest, but not Ed Loizeaux. His 20 by 30 foot S-gauge train room hosts 5 industries. There's the dairy section, the coal mining corner, the Foggy Hollow logging camp, a petroleum operation, and a steel mill. All of these industries rely on trains to either receive their raw materials or to ship their products out to consumers. And all of them are situated near the Hudson River, running from the Palisade Cliffs just outside of New York City through rural towns in upstate to Albany. The mighty Hudson serves as a link between the 5 industries on this ambitious layout.
The layout is based on the Catskill Mountains mainly because I lived in that area as a child. I grew up in the area. I think it's a beautiful part of the country. It's very picturesque, and it's a perfect setting for a model railroad layout. The corners of the room were kind of a tough challenge. We have these broad radius curves for the main line, which leaves little triangular places in the corners. And I filled those areas in with industries such as a coal mine and a logging area and an oil refinery and so forth to provide switching opportunities for the trains.
Like many men who have made model railroading their hobby, Ed can trace his interest back to memorable times he spent with his dad. There are 2 areas in the layout that pay special tribute to Ed's father, and the first one is here in the petroleum industry section. The senior Loizeaux worked for Mobil for almost 40 years, so Ed added these details in his honor. Although it's not seen, New York City is just around the bend of the Hudson, and if you follow the backdrop a bit further in this direction, the plumes of smoke lead you to the next industry, steel. This bustling area has warehouses, factories, a flour mill, and another mobile station. It's adjacent to the old part of town, whose seedier side includes a tattoo parlor and a boarding house. Just up the road from the steel mill, an unfortunate driver has had a run-in with a guardrail, and a tow truck waits in the wings. Nearby, a passenger station in town connects to the main line, where we follow it to Peekskill, a small upstate New York town. Following the track leads to a waterfall area where trains go over a large silver bridge, made out of over 6,500 pieces of plastic. Ed is particularly proud of the water scenes on his layout. There are hikers at the base of the waterfall and deer graze in the park. The lake was made of masonite and covered with many layers of wax to create a wet-looking surface. Many friends and craftspeople help Ed create individual components of the layout, but Ed built this stone arch viaduct himself. The other industries in this layout include one of New York State's dairy concerns, where a cooling tower, ice house, and cold power boiler all add to the scene's authenticity. There are several kinds of bulk milk cars, which are insulated glass-lined containers designed to keep the milk fresh and cold. As we move up the tracks from the dairy, we come to the Foggy Hollow logging camp, where 2 spar poles load logs onto steam-powered railroad cars.
Well, the lumbering operation is quite unique since I've modeled the entire process from cutting the trees down to the shipping of finished cut lumber to a customer. The process includes traveling on the railroad trains down to the sawmill, dumping the logs into a pond, lifting them onto a sawmill conveyor, cutting them up, pushing them up a narrow gauge railroad to the loading and storage area, and then loading it onto a freight train for delivery to the big city. So we've covered the entire process from the cutting of the tree to the finishing of the cut lumber.
Ed has quite a collection of cars that reflects his appreciation of both history and the trains that helped create that history. There are a number of World War II military trains that include an unusual hospital car with doctors and nurses and an ambulance car. And as a nod of appreciation to railroad workers, Ed has a steam-powered work train that features living quarters.
A true model railroad layout is never finished. My future plans include finishing up the electronics wiring so that I can use DCC to control the locomotives. I have some staging yards under construction at the moment, which will be in a different room, an adjacent room, and trains can enter onto the layout proper through a hole in the wall and circle the layout and exit back out to the staging yards. So formal op sessions will follow that, where my friends will come over and we will spend many an afternoon running the trains according to timetables and schedules, and with true professional management skills being used to keep the trains on time and on schedule.